For a long time, we've accepted a simple story. The war on drugs is a clear fight between good and evil, law enforcement versus the merchants of poison, a global crusade to clean up society. But behind this official story lies a much darker, more cynical, and more brutal truth, a web of betrayal and geopolitical games that goes beyond what most people can imagine. This truth wasn't uncovered in a leaked document. It was revealed through the tragic and horrifying death of a US federal agent. This is the story of Enrique Kiki Camarena, a true hero whose ultimate sacrifice proved that the war on drugs was never really about the drugs at all. Our story doesn't start in a grand courtroom, but on a blurry front line. In the 1980s, one man stood as the poster child for pure idealism: Enrique Kiki Camarena. Kiki wasn't just any agent, he was a US Marine veteran, a humble man with an unbreakable commitment to justice. He had been a firefighter and a local cop before finally joining the Drug Enforcement Administration, or DEA. Instead of choosing a safe desk job in America, Kiki volunteered to go to the front line into the heart of the darkness, Guadalajara, Mexico. For Kiki, this wasn't just a job, it was a personal mission, a calling. Along with his wife, Mika, and their three young children, he moved to a city that seemed beautiful on the surface but was hiding a terrible secret. Guadalajara in the early 80s was a city of contradictions. On the surface, it shined with flashy luxury, expensive boutiques, exclusive restaurants, and fancy nightclubs where the children of drug lords showed off their illicit wealth. Narco juniors drove the newest sports cars and wore glittering jewelry, enjoying a lifestyle paid for by blood and suffering. But Kiki quickly saw past this glamorous mask. Beneath it, the reality was dark and rotten. Guadalajara was the untouchable fortress of the Guadalajara Cartel, one of the most sophisticated criminal organizations the world had ever seen. This cartel wasn't just a street gang, it was a terrifyingly structured corporation led by three legendary figures. First, Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, known as El Padrino, or the Godfather. He was the cold, calculating business brain of the operation. He didn't just commit crimes, he built a multinational enterprise. He was the one who united all the rival smugglers under one banner. Most importantly, he partnered with Pablo Escobar's Medellin cartel in Colombia, opening the floodgates for cocaine to pour into the US through Mexico, a move that changed the drug world forever. Then there was Ernesto Don Neto Fonseca Carrillo, the old school boss. He was deeply respected and feared by everyone in the criminal underworld. His power came from decades of political connections and wealth, giving the cartel a safety net that made them untouchable. And finally, Rafael Caro Quintero, a farmer from rural Sinaloa who couldn't read or write but had a genius for agriculture. He revolutionized marijuana farming by developing a new, powerful seedless hybrid called Sinsemilla. His innovation turned Mexican weed into the most sought-after product on the black market, transforming it into a multi-billion-dollar industry. Together, these three men didn't just run a drug business, they owned the entire system. They bought protection from the highest officials, local police, military commanders, governors, judges, and even Mexico's most feared intelligence agency, the DFS. The DFS, which was supposed to be fighting crime, had basically become the cartel's private army, protecting their operations, eliminating rivals, and silencing anyone who dared to stand in their way. In Kiki's new world, a police badge could mean a cop, or it could mean a cartel killer. The line between law and crime had vanished. It was a narco state. Kiki, with his unwavering idealism, quickly realized that small-time busts would change nothing. Catching street dealers was like scooping water out of an ocean. Kiki wanted to cut the head off the snake. He wanted to bring down Felix Gallardo and his entire dark kingdom. For 4.5 stressful years, Kiki worked tirelessly and carefully. He went undercover, building a network of informants in a sea of massive corruption. He patiently gathered the pieces of a much larger puzzle. Every day was a gamble with his life. He collected intel on the cartel's complex structure, their smuggling routes, their money laundering methods, and most importantly, he quietly identified the long list of corrupt officials on the cartel's payroll. He realized this wasn't just a smuggling operation, it was a shadow government. And then, in 1984, Kiki's persistence led to the biggest break of his career. Through a brave informant and aerial surveillance photos, he found the crown jewel of Caro Quintero's empire, Rancho Buffalo. This wasn't just a farm, it was a massive industrial complex, a plantation city covering thousands of acres and employing over 10,000 poor farmers. It was a self-contained world with its own housing, stores, and even a church, all powered by a state-of-the-art irrigation system. Its annual production was estimated at $8 billion, an insane amount of money at the time. It was the lifeblood and the pride of the Guadalajara Cartel, and Kiki is the one who put it on the map. In November 1984, facing unstoppable pressure from the US and Kiki's undeniable intel, the Mexican government was forced to act. 450 Mexican soldiers, backed by DEA helicopters, finally raided Rancho Buffalo. They didn't make arrests, instead they set it all on fire. The sky over the desert turned black with smoke from billions of dollars of marijuana. It was a massive financial loss, but more importantly, it was a deep personal humiliation for the cartel bosses. They swore revenge, and they knew exactly who to blame. That persistent DEA agent, Enrique Kiki Camarena. Kiki was supposed to be safe. He was scheduled to be transferred back to the US in just 3 weeks. He had already started packing, dreaming of being reunited with his family, but fate had other plans. On February 7, 1985, around 2 p.m., Kiki left the U.S. consulate in Guadalajara. He was walking a few blocks to meet his wife Mika for lunch. He never made it. A car suddenly pulled up beside him. 5 men jumped out. Shockingly, one of the kidnappers was a commander of the Jalisco State Police, working directly for the cartel. In broad daylight on a busy street, a U.S. federal agent was kidnapped and thrown into a car. Kiki was taken to a luxury house at 881 Lope de Vega Street. It was owned by Rafael Caro Quintero. There, for the next 30-plus hours, he endured a living hell. This was not a quick revenge killing, it was a brutal, systematic interrogation designed to extract every piece of information from his body. Kiki was tortured inhumanely. His cheekbones, jaw, and nose were broken. A drill was used to bore a hole into his skull. His ribs were shattered one by one. To make sure he stayed conscious through the unimaginable pain, a doctor, Humberto Alvarez Machain, was hired. His only job was to inject Kiki with stimulants like amphetamines to keep his heart going just so the torture could continue. This entire horrifying process, every groan and every question, was recorded on audio tapes. Kiki's pained voice became an eternal testament to their cruelty and to a much bigger mystery. But the most disturbing part wasn't just the torture, it was the questions the torturers kept asking. They didn't just ask about his DEA operations or his informants, they wanted to know more. They repeatedly asked, "Who are your informants in the Mexican government?" And most chillingly, a question far outside the scope of a normal drug case. What do you know about our relationship with the United States? What do you know about CIA operations? Kiki Camarena's death triggered Operation Leyenda, Operation Legend, the largest and most expensive homicide investigation in DEA history. The US government responded with unprecedented fury, putting immense diplomatic and economic pressure on Mexico. They nearly shut down the entire US-Mexico border, a drastic move that caused millions of dollars in economic chaos every single day. The message from the US was clear: give us Kiki's killers or face the consequences. Under this unbearable pressure, Mexico's corrupt system began to crack. Rafael Caro Quintero and Don Neto Fonseca were arrested in 1985. El Padrino, Felix Gallardo, managed to hide for 4 years before he was finally caught in 1989. The Guadalajara Cartel collapsed, shattering into the smaller but equally violent cartels we know today, the Sinaloa, Tijuana, and Juarez cartels. As an indirect admission of guilt, the corrupt DFS intelligence agency was disbanded. But as persistent DEA and FBI agents dug deeper, a much darker truth began to surface. Kiki Camarena wasn't killed just because he destroyed a marijuana field. He was killed because he had accidentally stumbled upon a much bigger conspiracy, a dark affair involving the Guadalajara Cartel and secret agents from the US government itself. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration had one single obsession: stopping the spread of communism in Central America, specifically in Nicaragua. The CIA was actively supporting a right-wing rebel group known as the Contras to overthrow the leftist Sandinista government. However, the US Congress, afraid of another Vietnam, had passed a law explicitly banning that kind of military funding. The CIA needed dark money, off the books cash, to keep funding this secret war, and this is where the Guadalajara Cartel came in. According to credible testimony from cartel pilots, DEA informants, and even former cartel members, a horrific secret deal was made. The CIA allegedly made a deal with the devil, Felix Gallardo. The cartel was allowed to fly tons of cocaine into the US without any significant interference from US law enforcement. In exchange, a portion of those billions in drug money was funneled to buy weapons and fund the Contras. Some witnesses even claimed that cartel-owned ranches in Mexico were used as training grounds for Contra fighters, an illegal operation allegedly protected by both the CIA and the DFS. Kiki Camarena, with his sharp instincts, started noticing these anomalies. He saw strange flight patterns, detected unusual weapons cargo that had nothing to do with drugs, and heard whispers of secret military operations. He started asking the wrong questions to the wrong people, probing the strange relationship between the cartel, Mexican officials, and these mysterious operations in Central America. Kiki wasn't just a threat to the cartel's drug business, he was a threat to an illegal, covert CIA operation. He was threatening to pull back the curtain and expose the war on drugs as a sham, where elements of the US government were secretly in business with the enemy. He wasn't killed over weed. He was killed because he got too close to a truth that no one in power in Mexico or the United States wanted exposed. A truth that showed, for some in power, fighting communism was more important than stopping the flow of drugs onto America's streets. His death is the grim proof that the war on drugs was a dirty political game, where the life of one idealistic agent was just collateral damage. Kiki Camarena's story is a heartbreaking tragedy, a dark stain on US-Mexico relations. His sacrifice, while brutal and unfair, brought down the Guadalajara Cartel and triggered major reforms at the DEA. It also inspired the Red Ribbon Week movement, which educates millions of American children about the dangers of drugs, an eternal tribute to Kiki's bravery. But the real question remains, haunting us to this day: did we truly learn from Kiki's case? Or are we still fighting a war where the goals are far more complicated, darker, and more about power than justice? Kiki's death is an eternal reminder that in this murky war, the line between hero and villain often blurs, and sometimes the real enemy isn't the one openly breaking the law, but the one hiding behind a badge, secretly profiting from the suffering of others. Kiki Camarena's story forces us to ask forever: this war, Who is it really for? Kiki Camarena's death proved the war on drugs is often just a cover for a darker agenda. Was Kiki betrayed by his own country for political gain, or was he simply an idealist in the wrong place at the wrong time? Write your opinion in the comments. To unseal other archives that have been deliberately hidden from the public, subscribe to Underworld Archive and turn on your notification bell. Thank you for watching.